All right, so this is a recording for Book 23 of the Odyssey. First of all, let me give you a quick overview. Eurycleia tells Penelope the news that Odysseus really has come back, and then we see Penelope's uncertainty about this, how she kind of doubts this news, and part of that is because, it's been 20 years. Then there's this whole little episode, this exchange between Penelope and Odysseus about the marriage bed, and some things that Penelope says, and Odysseus gets really upset, and then Penelope believes, okay, this really has to be Odysseus. So Penelope is convinced, and they have their wonderful reunion, and as they are together, Odysseus tells about Tiresias' prophecy and what he has to do yet, and then Odysseus begins to tell Penelope his whole story. So if you missed anything, you get a sort of recap. So some key questions to pay attention to as we go through this. Why is Penelope so hesitant to greet her husband? Let's look for some key lines that help show that. How does Penelope test Odysseus to really make sure this isn't just some jerk in disguise? What quality does Penelope embody, especially in the reunion scene? How does Telemachus regard Penelope, and why? Like, she's saying, I'm not sure this is Odysseus. Telemachus has already spent time with him. How does he react, and why is he reacting that way? What is this deal with the secret signs Penelope goes through and the tests? And then, according to Odysseus, why doesn't Penelope welcome him right away? At first, he is kind of understanding of her coldness. Again, we get some information about Odysseus, like who he is here at home. He's very proud of his craftsmanship of their wedding bed, so we see a little more character development of him and his skills too. And we also have some Homeric similes to describe him. There is one to describe how he looks as Athena, again, makes him all godlike after he cleans up. But the one that I think is more important is this Homeric simile used to discuss his true feelings, how he's almost comparing himself to a shipwrecked sailor, which is ironic because he has been that, and how he longs for Penelope. Which, given the fact that he's been with Circe and Calypso, well, I'm a little skeptical, but okay. And then who is Penelope? We do see she's suspicious and cautious, but then, kind of ironic, she armed herself against the frauds of men, which is, something that normally you would think of a guy arming himself, but she also has to arm herself, and it's against these suitors and men who might come along and say, hey, I'm Odysseus returned. I don't know why she would believe someone saying that if it wasn't Odysseus, but I guess they were counting on the fact that people change over time, and maybe she would believe that tale. But above all, I think we see she's very loyal. No one else has even laid eyes on their bed, unlike Odysseus, who has been in some different beds himself. So, I'll just make this some general notes as I read if something comes up. The old nurse went upstairs exulting, with knees toiling and patter of slapping feet, to tell the mistress of her lord's return, and cried out by the lady's pillow, Wake! Wake up, dear child! Penelope, come down! See with your own eyes what all these years you longed for. Odysseus is here! Oh, in the end he came! And he has killed your suitors, killed them all, who made his house a bordel and ate his cattle, and raised their hands against his son. Penelope said, Dear nurse, the gods have touched you. They can put chaos into the clearest head, or bring a lunatic down to earth. Good sense you always had. They've touched you. What is this mockery you wake me up to tell me, breaking in on my sweet spell of sleep. I had not dozed away so tranquilly since my lord went to war on that ill wind to Ilion. Okay, so Penelope's acting kind of disgruntled that she got woken up and that she didn't get to keep sleeping, and this is the first time since Odysseus left that she actually had a good sleep. So she says to Eurycleia, "Oh, leave me back downstairs. If any other of my women came in babbling things like this to startle me, I'd see her flogged out of the house. Your old age spares you that." So this first encounter between Penelope and Eurycleia shows Penelope to be rather irritated and not kind. Eurycleia said, "Would I play such a trick on you, dear child? It is true, true as I tell you, he has come. The stranger they were baiting was Odysseus. Telemachus knew it days ago. Cool head, never to give his father away till he paid off those swollen dogs." The lady, in her heart's joy, now sprang up with sudden dazzling tears and hugged the old one, crying out, "But try to make it clear. If he came home in secret, as you say, could he engage them single-handed? How? They were all down there, still in the same crowd." Okay, so Penelope's getting a little less skeptical now, but she's like, if that was Odysseus, how did he kill them all? To this Eurycleia said, "I did not see it. I knew nothing. Only I heard the groans of men dying. We sat still in the inner rooms, holding our breath and marveling, shut in, until Telemachus came to the door and called me, your own dear son, sent this time by his father. So I went out and found Odysseus erect with dead men littering the floor, this way and that. If you had only seen him, it would have made your heart glow hot, a lion splashed with mire and blood. But now the cold corpses are all gathered at the gate, and he has cleansed his hall with fire and brimstone, a great blaze. Then he sent me here to you. Come with me. You may both embark this time for happiness together after pain, after long years. Here is your prayer, your passion granted. Your own lord lives. He is at home. He found you safe. He found his son. The suitors abused his house, but he has brought them down." The attentive lady said, "Do not lose yourself in this rejoicing. Wait. You know how splendid that return would be for us, how dear to me, dear to his son and mine. But no, it is not possible. Your notion must be wrong." So again, Penelope shows this skepticism or this doubt. Some god has killed the suitors. A god. Sick of their arrogance and brutal malice, for they honored no one, living good or bad, whoever came their way. Blind young fools, they've tasted death for it. But the true person of Odysseus? He lost his home. He died far from Achaea. So, instead of giving any credit to Odysseus initially here, Penelope is saying, no, some god finally got tired of the suitors and killed them all. The old nurse sighed. "How queer the way you talk. Here he is, large as life by his own fire, and you deny he ever will come home. Child, you always were mistrustful. But there's one sure mark, that I can tell you, that scar left by the boar's tusk long ago." All right, here we are with that boar's tusk story again. "I recognized it when I bathed his feet, and would have told you, but he stopped my mouth, forbade me in his craftiness. Come down, I stake my life on it. He's here. Let me die in agony if I lie." Penelope said, "Nurse dear, though you have your wits about you, still it is hard not to be taken in by the immortals. Let us join my son, though, and see the dead and that strange one who killed them." She turned then to descend the stair, her heart in tumult. Had she better keep her distance and question him, her husband? Should she run up to him, take his hands, kiss him now? Crossing the door sill, she sat down at once in firelight against the nearest wall, across the room from the Lord Odysseus. It's almost like they're having a staring contest. She's having this whole debate in her head, though. How should she react? This is very similar to when Odysseus was shipwrecked on the shores of Phaeacia, and he sees Nausicaa, And he was debating, okay, how do I react? Do I talk from a distance or do I go up and grab her by the knees? And so we see here too, Penelope is quite cautious, trying to decide what's best. There, leaning against a pillar, sat the man, and never lifted up his eyes, but only waited for what his wife would say when she had seen him. And she, for a long time, sat deathly still in wonderment, for sometimes as she gazed, she found him, yes, clearly like her husband, but sometimes blood and rags were all she saw. Telemachus's voice came to her ears. "Mother, cruel mother, do you feel nothing drawing yourself apart this way from father? Will you not sit with him and talk and question him? What other woman could remain so cold? Who shuns her lord, and he come back to her from wars and wandering after 20 years? Your heart is hard as flint and never changes." Penelope answered, "I am stunned, child. I cannot speak to him. I cannot question him. I cannot keep my eyes upon his face. If really he is Odysseus, truly home, beyond all doubts, we two shall know each other better than you or anyone. There are secret signs we know, we two." A smile now came to the lips of the patient hero Odysseus, who turned to Telemachus and said, "Peace. Let your mother test me at her leisure. Before long she will see and know me best. These tatters, dirt, all that I'm caked with now, make her look hard at me and doubt me still. As to this massacre, we must see the end." Okay, so Odysseus kind of rebukes Telemachus. Telemachus has no right to be upset that Penelope is acting so slowly, and he does kind of redirect Telemachus's attention that they're going to have to see what happens because they killed off all the suitors. So he kind of sends Telemachus off on a little mission. "Whoever kills one citizen, you know, and has no force of our men at his back, had better take himself abroad by night and leave his kin. Well, we cut down the flower of Ithaca, the mainstay of the town. Consider that." Telemachus replied respectfully, "Dear father, enough that you yourself study the danger, foresighted in combat as you are. They say you have no rival. We three stand ready to follow you and fight. I say, for our strength avails, we have the courage." And the great tactician Odysseus answered, "Good. Here's our best maneuver, as I see it. Bathe, you three, and put fresh clothing on. Order the women to adorn themselves, and let our admirable harper choose a tune for dancing. Some light-hearted air, and strum it. Anyone going by, or any neighbor, will think it is a wedding feast he hears." So Odysseus's plan is to kind of get Telemachus busy tricking the town in a way by having wedding music play. "These deaths must not be cried about the town till we can slip away to our own woods. We'll see what weapon then Zeus puts into our hands." They listened attentively and did his bidding, bathed and dressed afresh, and all the maids adorned themselves. Then Phemius the harper took his polished shell and plucked the strings, moving the company to desire for singing, for the sway and beat of dancing, until they made the manor hall resound with gaiety of men and grace of women. Anyone passing on the road would say, "Married at last, I see, the queen so many courted, sly, cattish wife she would not keep. Not she, the lord's estate until he came." So travelers' thoughts might run, but no one guessed the truth. Here comes a Homeric simile. Great-hearted Odysseus, home at last, was being bathed now by Eurynome, and rubbed with golden oil, and clothed again in a fresh tunic and cloak. Athena lent him beauty head to foot. She made him taller and massive too, with crisping hair and curls like petals of wild hyacinth, but all red golden. Think of gold infused on silver by a craftsman, whose fine art Hephaestus taught him, or Athena, one whose work moves to delight. Just so she lavished beauty over Odysseus's head and shoulders. He sat then in the same chair by the pillar, facing his silent wife, and said, "Strange woman, The immortals of Olympus made you hard, harder than any. Who else in the world would keep aloof as you do from her husband if he returned to her from years of trouble, cast on his own land in the 20th year? Nurse, make up a bed for me to sleep on. Her heart is iron in her breast. Penelope spoke to Odysseus now. She said, and now these are Penelope's very first words to him. Strange man, if man you are. There's her little bit of doubt that maybe he's actually a god. This is no pride on my part, nor scorn for you, not even wonder merely. I know so well how he appeared, boarding the ship for Troy, but all the same, make up his bed for him, Eurycleia. Place it outside the bedchamber my lord built with his own hands. Pile the big bed with fleeces, rugs, and sheets of purest linen. With this, she tried him to the breaking point, and he turned on her in a flash, raging. Okay, so this is really Penelope's first test, and we're going to hear about the bed. This is why this book is called The Trunk of the Olive Tree, because all of this does revolve around the bed. Trunk of the olive tree. Woman! By heaven, you've stung me now. Who dared to move my bed? No builder had the skill for that unless a god came down to turn the trick. No mortal in his best days could budge it with a crowbar. There is our pact and pledge, our secret sign built into that bed, my handiwork and no one else's. An old trunk of olive grew like a pillar on the building plot, and I laid out our bedroom around that tree, lined up the stone walls, built the walls and roof, gave it a doorway and smooth-fitting doors. Then I lopped off the silvery leaves and branches, hewed and shaped that stump from the roots up into a bedpost, drilled it, let it serve as model for the rest. I planed them all, inlaid them all with silver, gold, and ivory, and stretched a bed between, a pliant web of oxhide thongs, dyed crimson. There's our sign. I know no more. Could someone else's hand have sawn that trunk and dragged the frame away? So he's basically saying, yeah, here's how I made that olive tree bed, and if somebody moved it, had to have been a god because that bed wasn't going anywhere. Penelope's reaction then. This is almost like a camera shooting between the two, like how they react to each other. Their secret. As she heard it told, her knees grew tremulous and weak. Her heart failed her. With eyes brimming tears, she ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck and kissed him. Do not rage at me, Odysseus. No one ever matched your caution. Think what difficulty the gods gave. They denied us life together in our prime and flowering years, kept us from crossing into age together. Forgive me, don't be angry. I could not welcome you with love on sight. So she's kind of explaining herself here. I armed myself long ago against the frauds of men, impostors who might come, and all those many whose underhanded ways bring evil on. Helen of Argos, daughter of Zeus and Leda, would she have joined the stranger, lain with him, if she had known her destiny? So Penelope is kind of making a comparison between her actions and Helen's. Like she kind of learned from what Helen had done, and she's wondering if Helen had known what would all happen after Paris's visit, the whole Trojan War and everything, would she still have spent time with Paris? Known the Achaeans in arms would bring her back to her own country. Surely a goddess moved her to adultery, her blood unchilled by war and evil coming, the years, the desolation, ours too. But here and now, what sign could be so clear as this of our own bed? No other man has ever laid eyes on it, only my own slave, Actorus, that my father sent with me as a gift. She kept our door. You make my stiff heart know that I am yours. Okay, so she has been so faithful that no other man has ever even seen this bedroom. The only person who has come in is Actorus, her slave, who actually was kind of like a door guard. That doesn't sound like a fun job. So anyway, what does Odysseus say back? Now, from his breast into his eyes, the ache of longing mounted, and he wept at last. His dear wife, clear and faithful in his arms, he longed for, here comes another Homeric simile. He longed for as The sun-warmed earth is longed for by a swimmer spent in rough water where his ship went down under Poseidon's blows, gale winds, and tons of sea. Few men can keep alive through a big surf to crawl, clotted with brine, on kindly beaches in joy. Enjoy, knowing the abyss behind. So he's being compared to a shipwrecked sailor who survives. And so she too rejoiced, her gaze upon her husband, her white arms round him pressed as though forever. Big hug. The rose dawn might have found them weeping still, had not gray-eyed Athena slowed the night when night was most profound. Interesting. We have heard of God slowing down time, when Joshua's arms were held up and the fighting occurred. So here Athena is slowing down the night so that dawn does not come as soon. When night was most profound and held the dawn under the ocean of the east, that glossy team, Firebright and Daybright, the dawn's horses, that draw her heavenward for men, Athena stayed their harnessing. In other words, she didn't let dawn harness her horses. Then said Odysseus, my dear, we have not won through to the end. One trial, I do not know how long, is left for me to see fulfilled. Tiresias's ghost forewarned me the night I stood upon the shore of death, asking about my friend's homecoming and my own. Okay, we're going to get the Oer story once again. But now the hour grows late, and it is bedtime. Rest will be sweet for us. Let us lie down. To this Penelope replied, that bed, that rest is yours whenever desire moves you. Now the kind powers have brought you home at last, but as your thought has dwelt upon it, tell me, what is the trial you face? I must know soon. What does it matter if I learn tonight? The teller of many stories, that's Odysseus, said, my strange one, must you again and even now urge me to talk? Here is a plodding tale, no charm in it, no relish in the telling. Tiresias told me I must take an oar and trudge the mainland, going from town to town, until I discover men who have never known the salt blue sea, nor flavor of salt meat, strangers to painted prows, to watercraft and oars like wings, dipping across the water. The moment of revelation he foretold was this, for you may share the prophecy. Some traveler falling in with me will say, a winnowing fan that on your shoulder, sir? There I must plant my oar on that very spot, with burnt offerings to Poseidon of the waters, a ram, a bull, a great buck boar. Thereafter, when I come home again, I am to slay full hecatombs to the gods, who own broad heaven one by one. Then death will drift upon me from seaward, mild as air, mild as your hand in my well-tended weariness of age, contented folk around me on our island. He said all this must come. So again, that's the prophecy, what Odysseus still has to do with that oar, make all those sacrifices, and then he's going to have a peaceful death. Penelope said, if by the god's grace age at least is kind, we have that promise, trials will end in peace. So he confided in her, and she answered. Meanwhile, Eurynome and the nurse together laid soft coverlets on the master's bed, working in haste by torchlight. Eurycleia retired to her quarters for the night, and then Eurynome, as maid in waiting, lighted her lord and lady to their chamber with bright brands. She vanished. So they came into that bed, so steadfast loved of old, opening glad arms to one another. Okay, so this is where the whole book of the Odyssey seems like The Hobbit. If you've watched The Hobbit, they could have ended it at so many different points. But no, they have one more thing to show, and then one more thing to show, and one more thing to show. That's kind of the same way here. We're not done with book 23, and then we have the whole book 24. It's like, well, let's tie up these loose ends and these and these. So that's just an epic quality. So Odysseus and Penelope finally went to bed, and now we go to Telemachus briefly. Telemachus by now had hushed the dancing, hushed the women. In the darkened hall he and the cowherd and the swineherd slept. The royal pair mingled in love again, and afterward lay revelling in stories, hers of the siege, her beauty stood at home from arrogant suitors crowding on her sight, and how they fed their courtship on his cattle, oxen, and fat sheep, and drank up rivers of wines out of the vats. Okay, so not a lot of time is spent on Helen's story, so she doesn't get much space here. I'm sorry, Helen. Penelope. Penelope's short recap. But what's interesting is it is called a siege. And really she was attacked by all those suitors. Now Odysseus gets a much larger chunk. Odysseus told of what hard blows he had dealt out to others and of what blows he had taken. All that story. She could not close her eyes till all was told. If you had ever wanted to skip reading the Odyssey and just get the quickest recap ever, here you go. Page 439. We get it in about 6 stanzas or so. His raid on the Cicones, first of all, and how he visited the Lotus Eaters, and what the Cyclops did, and how those shipmates piteously devoured were avenged. Then of his touching Aeolus's isle, and how that king refitted him for sailing to Ithaca. All vain. Gales blew him back, groaning over the fish-cold sea. Then how he reached the Lastrygonians' distant bay, and how they smashed his ships and his companions. Circe, then, of her deceits and magic, then of his voyage to the wide underworld of dark, the house of death, and questioning Tiresias' Theban spirit. Dead companions many he saw there, and his mother too. Of this he told his wife, and told how later he heard the choir of maddening sirens coasted the wandering rocks, Charybdis' pool, and the fiend Scylla who takes toll of men. Then how his shipmates killed Lord Helios' cattle, and how Zeus, thundering in towering heaven, split their fast ship with his fuming bolt. So all hands perished. He alone survived, cast away on Calypso's isle, Ogygia. He told then how that nymph detained him there, in her smooth caves, craving him for her husband, and how, in her devoted lust, she swore he should not die nor grow old all his days, but he held out against her. Last of all, what sea toil brought him to the Phaeacians, their welcome, how they took him to their hearts, and gave him passage to his own dear island, with gifts of garments gold and bronze. Remembering, he drowsed over the story's end. Sweet sleep relaxed his limbs and his care-burdened breast. I think he skipped a bit. Anyway, so now Athena kind of comes along here. Other affairs were in Athena's keeping. Waiting until Odysseus had his pleasure of love and sleep, the gray-eyed one bestirred the fresh dawn from her bed of paling ocean to bring up daylight to her golden chair. And from his fleecy bed Odysseus arose. He said to Penelope, "My lady, what ordeals have we not endured? Here waiting you had your grief, while my return dragged out my hard adventures, pitting myself against the gods' will and Zeus, who pinned me down far from home. But now our life resumes. We've come together to our longed-for bed. Take care of what is left me in our house. As to the flocks that pack of wolves laid waste, they'll be replenished. Scores I'll get on raids, and other scores our island friends will give me, till all the folds are full again." So basically, Odysseus says he'll get his wealth back. Says he'll get all his wealth back. Okay. This day, I'm off up country to the orchards. I must see my noble father. I'll go see Dad. Laertes. For he missed me sorely, and here's my command for you, a strict one, though you may need none, clever as you are. Word will get about, as the sun goes higher, of how I killed those lads. Go to your rooms on the upper floor and take your women. Stay there with never a glance outside or a word to anyone. So go hide in your upper rooms. fitting cuirass and sword belt to his shoulders, he woke his herdsmen, woke Telemachus, ordering all in arms. They dressed quickly, and all in war gear sallied from the gate, led by Odysseus. Now it was broad day, but these 3 men Athena hid in darkness, going before them swiftly from the town. So kind of like Athena had put a fog around Odysseus when he was in the land of Phaeacia, and he was walking from the place he had met Nausicaa to the actual palace. Again, she hides them. Athena hides and the 3 guys: Telemachus, swineherd, and cowherd. Darkness as they go to see Laertes. Okay, and so that is book 23.